Welcome everyone. My name is Brett Heintzman, and I am so glad that you are here to join us for a powerful teaching series called Jericho, Your Journey to Deliverance and Freedom. You know, we all have issues. They're not the same. My issues are different than yours. And this story was birthed, this teaching was birthed out of my personal story, one where out of my own bondage, emotional, relational garbage that had been instilled in me through my own story, God had revealed to me a powerful message of deliverance and freedom. And I can say to you that today I am free from the things that held me back. And you can be too. That's my message in my ministry now, and it's the teaching you're about to experience here in Jericho, Your Journey to Deliverance and Freedom. All these things come to us because of lies, and we become blinded in our lives because of the lies that are spoken into us. So this first session, as we're ready to unfold this truth, is all about being blinded by lies, and we are going to uncover what those things are. We're going to see them for what they are, and we are going to start with these first few sessions all on powerful revelation about what's going on and what's been invested in us, what the enemy has been up to, but that help is on the way. So thank you for joining us. Let's get started right now. I want to just give you a short introduction about how this teaching came about. You know, some people sit down and they think they're just going to write a book, and it didn't happen that way for me. And this story is birthed from a very deep and personal experience. And actually later on in this teaching series, you're going to get a chance to hear about that personal experience. But we're going to wait till a while into the teaching, and that's actually very much on purpose, because I want you to focus on what God is doing. You'll hear what He did in me later, but I want you to focus on what God is doing. This series is a powerful, powerful mirror of what God wants to do in your life regarding deliverance and freedom from the ways that we've been hurt and harmed, the bondage in our lives that is spiritual in nature, emotional, relational in nature. And I'll give you a snippet about mine. My big issue in life, because we all have issues, right? Amen? You know, and sometimes we say that. We say, you know, oh, I have issues, and we kind of say it as a joke. But when our issues are really serious, we might be smiling on the outside, but they're pretty serious on the inside. And these issues are big. And my issue was shame. Now, what is shame? Well, shame is this insidious thing. You know, there's a big difference between like guilt and shame. So guilt happens when we've done a thing and we don't feel good about the thing we did. We feel guilty because we did it. But shame is different. Shame gets into us, and it basically was telling me, I'm bad. There's something flawed in me. And it would manifest itself in like great darkness. I mean, to the place where I couldn't even function, to the place where I had not any good thoughts about myself. I would wish horrible things for myself. Dark, serious dark times. And it came in all different ways and for all different reasons. And you're going to hear bits and pieces of my story as we go through. And I'm hoping that you'll be able to identify bits and pieces of your own story, because that's the purpose why we're walking through this teaching. This teaching is so that we can be set free from the things that continue to harm us on the inside. And so as we navigate through this teaching, we're going to look at it through 3 lessons. The first 3 sessions we're going to spend together are very foundational in nature. The first one, we're going to look at like what's the condition going on in us when we're in spiritual bondage. The second session is going to talk about there is help and there is hope. Because I don't know about you, but with me, when I'm in that dark place, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of hope. It feels very dark, and it feels like somehow everyone else is getting their healing, everyone else is getting their deliverance. I was left holding the door somewhere. God, where are you? That's been what I asked for years, and even resigned myself to the fact that maybe this healing will never come. When we're in that place, we need the hope that help is on the way. That's our second session. The third session we're going to look at, that's the foundation for the teaching, says, what's gotten into me? In other words, what is it that's at work in me and through me that causes this? Because how can we deal with something if we don't know what it is? If you go to the doctor and the ultimate problem with you is cancer, and the doctor says there's nothing wrong with you, take 2 aspirin and go home, What are the chances of the cancer being taken care of, right? We can't treat spiritual cancer with aspirin, and yet I think that's what we've done so many times. I want to get to the cancer, and I want to root it out in the power of God, and that's what we're hoping this teaching will do. But we can't root out what we don't know. And so we want to identify it clearly. So we're going to take a look, starting right now in this first session, with the condition. What is the condition that happens to us? And I can tell you that we are blinded many times to even what is going on. And what we're blinded by is lies. You can open up your workbook to the 4th page, and you can take notes. I want to invite you to interact with this. And in fact, I can tell you right here at the outset, there's a lot of different places where you're going to be encouraged to write things down. And I want to tell you now, don't be afraid to pick up the pen and write things down. That one of the key things that's going to happen in our time together is that you're going to learn that it's a lot easier to navigate life we know something's wrong, but we know that it will be even more painful if we have to look at it, remember it, write it, talk about it. But guess what? That's the path to go through to get the freedom. And so there's many places we're going to ask you process through this one bit at a time. We're going to write down our experiences. We're going to root things out. We're going to bring things up, but not for the sake of causing additional harm. The reason we bring them up is to turn them into healing. So you just stay with us through this teaching because you're going to experience this power. I want to tell you as we begin about a man that I taught once in a drug rehab clinic. We had a small group of people gathered for a teaching that day, and in the middle of the teaching, this man who had come in, who actually had a real arrogant attitude. When he came into the room, it was kind of like, hey, I'm cool, and everyone knows it, and look at me, I've got it all together. And I'm thinking, really? We're in a drug rehab, okay? But he's got it all together. Well, as the teaching began to unfold, and all of a sudden his attitude began to change. The swagger and the arrogance began to change. But it wasn't anger that he was exhibiting. It was much different. It was like something pulled the lid off the can of worms in his soul. And he all of a sudden, there was this stirring you could see happen. It manifested on his face. And so we kind of paused the teaching, and I said, anyone have something they want to talk about? And this man began to talk. Because what we were discussing at the moment was really, truly believing in God, not just acknowledging that God exists, but I mean believing in a way that we actually are ready to just give our all over to Him. Nothing's held back. And then confronting roadblocks to this belief, and he was like, belief? You want to talk to me about believing in Jesus? Let me tell you my story. He begins to tell a story about the previous winter wanting to commit suicide on a below-zero night in Buffalo, New York. He's sleeping on a park bench and decides that it would be better if he takes his own life. So he walks toward a bridge, and he's ready to jump off this bridge a good distance into a river and take his life because he's done. And he has a companion and he has kids. And so he's ready to take his life. So he's standing on the rail of the bridge and a car drives by. And this little old man pulls up and says, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm done. It's over." And he said, "Don't do that. Come on, get down off the rail." So the guy decides to come down off the rail. The man gave him $20. He said, "I still wanted to die, so I went and bought a fifth of gin and crack cocaine and went back to the park bench, drank the entire bottle, did all the crack cocaine, and still wanted to die. I don't know why I'm here." And I said, well, what does that have to do with the belief? He says, "Let me tell you something." He said, when I grew up, I had dyslexia. No one knew what to do with me. I couldn't read, I couldn't write. And everyone just kept giving me these, words, especially in the church. I went to church, he said, as a kid, and they would say, "You just need to have more faith in Jesus." He's like, how much more faith am I supposed to have before God fixes this thing? What's the matter with me, and why isn't anything happening for me? And he was frustrated. He said, "Do you think I want the law at my door in the middle of the night taking my kids? Do you think that I want to live sleeping on a park bench? Do you think I want my existence to be that I can't even earn $12 stinking an hour because I can't read or write? I can't throw garbage in the back of a truck because I can't get a job." He goes, "You'll have to forgive me. I believe there's a Jesus. I just believe there ain't no Jesus for me." And he was dead serious. In other words, he believes that there is this God, but this God who is supposedly a benefactor and supposedly all-loving, he could not get to the place where he could see that applying to his own life. Why? Because of the pain. And because he had believed a lie that was not true. And what you and I end up doing in our lives is we believe lies that are not true. And it causes us to stumble through life. It caused me to stumble through my life, one bit at a time. I just love that story. I believe there's a Jesus. I just believe there ain't no Jesus for me. How sad. Maybe that's where you are. To be honest with you, to some degree, that's where I was. I grew up in the church. Age 13, came to Christ. Always served Christ. Immediately got involved in the church. I tell people I fell in love with the church before I fell in love with Jesus. I had an alcoholic father at home, a mother who didn't know what to do with him. Our home was a mess. We swept everything under the rug. Nothing ever was resolved. There was no such thing as conflict resolution in our house, just conflict. And when I went to church, those people were nice. So I loved them, and they loved me. And they saw value in me. I fell in love with them. Sometime later, I fell in love with Jesus. But what about the pain? What about the things that come into our... What do you do with that? If we're just honest, there's a lot of well-meaning people in churches who are very ill-equipped to help people deal with it. You ever tried to tell someone your deepest pain and someone else just kind of glosses over and goes, well, yeah, good luck with that, and they turn around and walk away? And that makes you feel even worse. Like, seriously, am I that broken that I'm like beyond help? What in the world gives, right? That's where this guy was. That's where I was. That's probably where some of you are. I love this passage in Proverbs 29:18. This passage of Scripture I've written in here from the Message version, the Message translation of the Bible, and I love the way Eugene Peterson quotes this. This is the verse that we typically understand as saying, without a vision, the people perish. Here's what he says. If people can't see what God is doing, they stumble all over themselves. But when they attend to what he reveals, they are most blessed. You ever feel like that? Like you're just tripping all over yourself? Walking through life, I have no idea how I got here, where I'm going, or what's next. It just seems like there's going to be another block to trip over. And sometimes we trip because we can't see what God is doing, how he's working, or what he wants to do, or even where to find the door to get into the throne room. That was the case for our friend who was going to jump off the bridge, and it might be your case. I want to help show you the way to where the door is and to enter in. God has such wonderful things for us. But look at the reasons that we stumble all over ourselves. Things like fear. Fear is such a motivator for us. Have you ever been afraid of failure? But here's the other one. Have you ever been afraid of success? I've met both. Like, I'm scared half to death to fail because that shame would just be ramped up again. But I'm scared half to death of success because now I might actually have to thrive in something. And I don't even know who I am if I'm in that space. I'm stuck. And I'm stuck by fear. Here's the other thing. Unhealed pain, abuse, no resolution. Things happen in your life. And you don't know what to do with these things. Perhaps the perpetrator is now dead or missing or somewhere else. You don't know how to bring resolution or restitution to this. What do I do with this pain? Or you've tried and the other person's completely unwilling and you're left here in this place like, I have no clue what to do with this. Here's another reason we stumble over ourselves. Unconfessed sin. We have done things as well. We can't let ourselves off the hook here, right? Nor could I let myself off the hook. My life was a product of what was invested in me in the negative by others, their sin, and my own that I had to own up to and take responsibility for. So when you and I have unconfessed sin, it is a cancer in our soul, and it causes us to, our walk in life is stumbling all over. How about this one? Relationship rifts. You know, relationships are really tricky. And when they're a mess, we're a mess. I don't know about you, but I feel like some days, you know, If I have a rift with my wife at home, it's like everything else is set up for failure that day. It's like it just feels like the wheels fall off the cart. I don't know what to do with myself. So now put yourself in a relationship constantly that's constantly in stirring. There's no resolution. You don't know what to do with this. It causes us to trip. Past or present failure. I failed. I can't go back and undo it. I don't know what to do about it. Or I just failed again. When is this going to stop for my life? When is it going to change? Or this one, negative circumstances. So many people today falsely blame negative circumstances for all the troubles in their life. And if you start just asking questions of everyone else in the world, you'll find you're no different, they're no different. We all got them. And I may not want your difficult circumstances, and you likely won't want mine either. It's just the way it works. But we trip all over ourselves because of them, and so much more. This so much more can be anything else that causes you to trip and stumble through life. We're going to identify right now what are these issues for you. See, here's the first space for you to write. And you're going to ask yourself, what is it that are my issues? And try your best to identify them. Now, sometimes, honestly, we would ask that question, you're not even sure you can answer it. I don't know what they are. You know, it's like sometimes we'll ask people how to pray for them. How can I pray for you? Well, they're not even sure what their deep need is, so how can they tell us? And so we're going to learn as we go along that we're going to start trying to self-identify and be self-aware, but later on we're also going to invite the Holy Spirit in, and He's going to help us be aware of our issues, because God will teach us things about ourselves that we've stuffed down inside long ago and didn't know what to do with, and He will do it graciously so we can be healed. So, what are your issues? You're going to have a space there to write them down. Here's the problem. The big problem is this. Here's what we have going on. We have a false identity that causes a false mindset. Identity is a very interesting thing. It's what we determine we are. It's what we believe we are. It's like once I knew two sisters. They were both extremely musically gifted. One of them was really gifted, but, you know, she had her sister, and her sister was like really gifted, right? Well, guess what? The other sister, who was gifted, but not as much as the older sister, the younger sister, she had this attitude that said, I can go do anything. I can conquer the world. She started getting singing engagements. She would make local appearances. If there was any kind of festival in town, she was there. The other sister had this identity where she began to say of herself, I could never do that. I'm not that good. I would begin to speak in the negative over her life. She never flourished as the singer that she was. Because even though she had the latent ability within her, she had told herself what she was not. And we have to be very careful, because most of us, and I know myself, when we are stuck in that broken place, that place with all of our bondage going on, we have identified ourselves. We have spoken over ourselves an identity that is based on lies. And we believe it. We believe it to be true. A false identity, it's written right here at the bottom of your page here. A false identity is full of negative I statements. I am a bad person. I will never escape this pain. I will always be stuck in this hopeless situation. I'm never getting out of this trouble or relationship. We can't see the forest through the trees because we keep saying things in the negative. And we believe them because of things that have been invested in us, things that have been told to us. When you're told you're worthless over and over, at some point you go, I'm worthless. When I was young, my father actually told my relatives that he was embarrassed for people to know I was his son. And at some point you say of yourself, I'm nothing but an embarrassment. That's who I am. It's a lie. It's a lie. But it gets woven into our identity. You see how this is connecting? And this is what we want you to begin to understand. So the false identity now, the lie of the false identity, produces a false mindset. Now our mind gets wrapped around this lie. And this is what we tell ourselves we are. So over on page 5 of your notes, you're going to see this chart. And here's what we learned. We all have 3 tenses, if you will, in our lives. We have a present, the right now, the here and now. We have a past, and we have a future. For those of us that have had the lies invested in our lives so that we have now this false identity that gives way to the false mindset, here's what the false mindset looks like. We dwell in the past. We dwell in what happened. And the evidence of that isn't so much that you say, well, I'm not so sure I think about that all the time. It's not that. It's what happens to you in the present because of the unhealed past. So let me give you an example of that. Part of my story is that when I was going to go to college, I had that opportunity stolen from me. It was literally paid for 3 times over. I had a scholarship, a grant, and I think another state grant or something like that. But it was paid for 3 times over. And I was so proud that I'd won this scholarship. But I told you, my father, he was a bit of a mess. And he really put the pressure on me. We had a family business. And he basically told me one night, and I was like ready to start school the next day. And he said, if you go to school tomorrow, then get out of the house. Your job with the family business is over. No more money. Get out of here. I don't want you here. And never come back. But if you don't go and you stay, you can keep your job and this business will be yours someday. I was scared half to death. What do I do with this? And so I decided that I would just give in. I wasn't prepared because I know some people might rise up and say, oh yeah? Well, let me show you. I can make it. And they might, become very embittered and just go out and prove. That wasn't me. I was paralyzed. I had no idea what to do. So now, fast forward a great number of years, long after that opportunity was taken, I was attending a college orientation with a family member, right? So this young lady in our family is getting ready to start college, and as we're walking through the campus, and it's a gorgeous, gorgeous campus, she's making comments like, yeah, it's a nice little school. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this anger wells up in me. I mean, just like, woof. Where did this come from? And I'm getting really bitter, and I'm thinking to myself, why, you little stinking, I will take you out back. And I was just embittered. Well, where does that come from? I can tell you where it comes from, because I lost my opportunity. Now, I hadn't remembered that a long time ago, but because of what happened in the unhealed pain in the past, the present begins to manifest something. See how this works? We have to recognize what's happening in our present, and we're actually dwelling in the past when that happens here, and there's many unresolved things, which then means in the present we're living in survival mode. We're getting by. We're still functioning. We're still moving through life. We're getting up every day. We're going to work. We're functioning, but we're surviving. Mere survival. We're not truly thriving. And then what happens to our future? There's little to no hope. That's what happens to us. There's just little to no hope. As I look at my future, I can't see where I'm going because I'm still living in this past that hurts so much, which is paralyzing me in my present, which means I can't even get out there. I'm just trying to get through today. And this is where the brick wall of Jericho comes into play. It stands between your present and your future. Because of the lie that gives birth to the false identity, which now gives birth to a false mindset, we live in this place where we are basically paralyzed. So having looked at all this so far, the big question is this: what is your present condition? It's now got to be about you. This is the reason you're going through this. I'm assuming because you got into this teaching and you're wanting to examine this teaching, you're doing it because perhaps you're saying, I think there might be something unresolved in my life. Now it's time to figure out what those things are. I want to encourage you to write, and I want to encourage you to be honest in your writing. If you are not honest, you're not helping you at all. Perhaps there's been times where you've had a chance in the past to confront things like this and it's too painful. I get that. I understand that. I had times in my past where I was going to confront those things, and it was really painful. That's when some of the darkest moments came. But I want to encourage you. Here's what I want to tell you about that particular dynamic, about the pain that comes back. I'm only going to experience the pain of losing that opportunity to go to school once in my life in real time as a real experience. I want you to just hear this loud and clear. An experience of remembrance holds no danger over my life. It can't really do anything else to me. It's already been gone. See what I'm saying? So it's not going to harm you anymore to bring it back. Now, perhaps in the past you've had people stir things up for harmful reasons. Jab it at you. The devil's really good with that. He's an accuser, right? He'll accuse you or he'll remind you. That's what he loves speaking the lie. He's the father of all lies, the scripture says. And so he will come back to you and whisper in your ear and remind you of all the lies. You'll be on the threshold of something really great in your life and he'll come back, oh, remember who you really are. You can't really do that. You'll never really get that. You're not talented enough. You won't be able to make it happen. He loves to lie. So we have to confront those because the whole purpose of this teaching, navigating through these sessions, is to put that to death once and for all and move on in a new way. So we're going to encourage you to be honest. So the two simple principles here that we taught of bondage to things in our past, resulting in a false identity based on a false mindset in the present, they've likely got you thinking. You're likely processing in your own mind, okay, here's what's going on with me. So now, what is your life story as it relates to those principles? And the good news is there's a space there for you to write. Take advantage of it. Get more paper if you need it. Get it out on paper. There's something that happens when we own up to it. When you take that pen and you put it on a piece of paper and you begin to write out the things that happen to you, it becomes real. It's not like you didn't know them already, right? But I can guarantee you that some of you are going to pick up that pen and you're going to go to write and there's going to be this big hesitation. And I can tell you, it's not God that's calling you to hesitation to write it. He wants to get it out of you. It's the enemy that's saying, leave the cancer in there. Don't walk toward freedom. Just let it simmer in there. This is going to be too painful for you. And it's not. He knows better. He's dead already, okay? So you need to understand that and walk forward. So, what is your present condition? Now, we need to confront a couple other things in regards to our condition. And that is as we turn over to page 6 in your workbook, that is this question that many of us will ask so much throughout our lives and in our pain. We say, why is my deliverance delayed? Like, God, where are you? Now, I wish I could have the answer and tell you, here's exactly why God delays our deliverance. I wish I could tell you why all the pain invested in me prior to the age of 16 took until I was in my late 40s to do something about it. I wish I could tell you. I don't know, other than I know how God works now. I've seen more of his ways than I've ever seen before, and I know how he works, and that's what we're going to uncover. But what we have to be very careful of is how we approach God. Now, he's great. He'll take all of your emotion. He'll take it. Trust me. Just read through the Psalms. Read through all the statements of questioning in the Psalms and people asking, why is this happening? Why are my enemies running me over? And they're very authentic and honest with their emotions, and you can be too. But what we're going to get you to do right here in this step is pray. We're going to take you right to honest reflection. We're going to get things out. We're going to take you to prayer, and we're going to take you to the Word of God. Do not resist any of the three. These are the cornerstones of this teaching. So you got to make sure and participate in the process. So, do you have that feeling that God's delayed your deliverance for no purposeful reason? Like, God, I don't know why. Why is this taking so long? Well, if you do, that's fine, but be honest. Approach it with honesty and write an honest prayer to God with honest words, expressing to him your thoughts. You've got to get that out too. I don't know about you, but I've felt this way sometimes during my journey where I would pray to God something truly authentic that just revealed the yuck in my soul. And then when I was done, I thought, I better run. The lightning's coming. You ever think that? Like now I just said the bad words. I don't know if God can handle those words. It's part of my story you'll hear about. I just, because it's in there. God knows it's in there. He wants to get it out. It's got to come out. You've got to say it. You've got to be honest about it. And then the minute you do, you're like, oh, I'm sorry, God, I said those bad words, But we've got to be honest. Don't fear that. It's okay. He can handle the language. Just get it out. Get your doubts down on paper as to why your deliverance has been delayed. But here's another thing that we're going to talk about too is this now becomes like, we got to be careful. We can cross over into like an attitude where we take attitude with Jesus. You ever have people come up to you and they like give you attitude? And they like cross a line. They don't even know what they don't know about you. And so the disciples did this with Jesus one day. They're in this boat and they're out on the sea and a big storm comes up, right? So Jesus is down under deck. He's sleeping on a cushion. He's taking a nap in the middle of the storm, and the disciples are up trying to keep the ship from sinking. And they literally go down and wake him up, and they use this phrase. They say, Lord, don't you care? You ever say that to Jesus before? About your own brokenness? I sure did. I don't know how many times. Lord, really, don't you care? Seriously, don't you care? What is this game we're playing with my life? Don't you care? You have to be honest, but here's the thing we have to be careful of. And on page 6 in your workbook here, I said we have to ask the question, have I crossed the line? You see, there's this line that we cross in praying. Like when we ask God, don't you care? We actually run the risk of accusing God that we care more about our situation than he does. We need to be reminded that it's impossible for us to care more about ourselves, our loved ones, our problems, or their problems. You can't care about them more than God can. That's impossible for you to do. And in fact, that whole mindset is all part of the woven together mess that's become our identity and our mindset. It too must be dealt with. So we have to bring those accusations out. So now that you've just honestly poured out your heart to God in the areas you feel your deliverance has been delayed, now we take a look at this other layer. Have I crossed the line? Have I actually accused God of something that's an unfair accusation? So there's a little portion right at the bottom of the page that says, my situation leads to my accusation. Situations always lead to accusation. You ever have met someone in your life that, they go through all kinds of trouble, but it's always someone else's fault? See, they have situations, and they lead to accusations. I got this thing going on, but it's not me, it's them. I got this other problem going on, but it's not me, it's them. Well, there's only one common denominator to all the problems, by the way, and that's you, right? Me, whoever's involved in it. And so we have to be careful. Is it really that many people are to blame? Is it really that your situation is that different? So we have to ask of God, is it really that he doesn't care? Or am I misunderstanding and not getting something? We have to just be careful. So be honest here. Have you had a situation that has caused you to accuse God in any way? Maybe it's not the Lord, do you care? But maybe it's just flat out, Lord, I don't believe you care. Or, Lord, I don't believe you can or will do anything about this. Whatever the accusation is, now is a time for honesty, because all these things, as we wrap up our first session and we turn you loose to discuss in your groups or work by yourself, or if you're sitting at home writing in these books, whatever the situation may be, as we turn you loose to be honest with it, here's what you need to understand. We're talking about the condition, and we're helping to identify the condition. What is it that's going on in my life? And now we're going to begin to start step by step. You got to stay with us because it's going to take a while to unpack all this. See, here's what happens so many times. We get to this first threshold and we start stirring again. Everything's starting to churn up again. And now we're going, I've never known what to do with this before. I don't know what to do with it now. Seriously, you're going to make me remember all this garbage again? Why? What is the purpose of this? If you will stay with us, and you'll stay in this process, you'll walk with me through this, I promise you. I promise you. I can promise you because God is faithful. He will teach you. You will learn. You will be journeying a path toward freedom. If you participate with it, you will learn more about him. If you don't check out now because it feels hard and you stay with it, God is going to do miraculous things in your life. I promise you that. Amen? So the condition, we are blinded by lies, but we are going to be blinded no more, because we are going to be honest with ourselves and we're going to be honest with God, and we're going to discover the condition of our lives. So as you can see, the false identity and the false mindset, those are the foundations of our bondage. You saw this in the people of Israel. They were slaves in Egypt, and even though God had declared their freedom, they couldn't believe it in their mind. They had identified themselves as slaves and they lived like slaves. Now is your time to begin your own work of your own story. Take that workbook, go to your workbook, write down your story, write down the lies that you have believed, write down the ways that you've accused God because of your situation, and the way you might feel if you think God has delayed your deliverance. Write those things down. Get those feelings out on paper. Confront them. Participating fully now will set the stage for what is to come. And what's to come is more understanding. So stay with us, go into your workbook, do that work, and then join us again for the next session.